Welcome back. Hope your lunch was as enjoyable as mine. It's fun to have these times to get together and to exchange things between this fabulous roster of speakers and artists. And I didn't even realize until this morning the connection that we have here. In the same decade that Narcissus Quagliata was leaving Italy to come to the Bay Area, that was 1961, Richard Marquis was leaving the Bay Area to go to Italy. Did you know Narcissus was coming, or what? And that was to Venice, to be specific, where he became one of the first Americans to not only observe, but to work in one of the most secretive glass-blowing enclaves in the world, the Venini Glassworks. What Dick did with what he learned has become legend in our community. A legend that is supported by innumerable awards, including the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Glass Art Society, and representation in more than 50 international collections, from the Metropolitan in New York to LACMA in Los Angeles to the Victoria and Albert in London. Among the many honors that Bullseye has enjoyed in its own lifetime has been that of having Dick start to use our glass about 20 years ago, or as he has titled it, to misuse it. I give you our friend, the always unpredictable and charmingly revolting Richard Marquis. Oh.
Come on down. Oh. Thanks, Lonnie. So this is true. This is the last one, and you'll see why in a little while. I'm just not going to do this anymore. I get nervous, and I just don't like it. Even though I don't sometimes appear nervous, I really am. And I'm going to show a bunch of slides of my early work, and I'll go pretty fast through it until I get to where I start using Bullseye. Then I'll slow down and explain a few things. But before I do anything, this friend of mine, Mark Graham, who's an old glassblower, but more known as a musician, he wrote this song about me, and I want to play it. It takes 3 minutes, and then I'll go into my talk. So if the magic video guy can do this.
The curtain of darkness is falling, and my friends are all here at my side. Are those the sweet voices of angels as I rise on that heavenly tide? All hearts overflowing with sadness, and those words left so often unsaid. And then I heard a voice whispering softly, could I have all your stuff when you're dead? Could I have all your outboards and ladders, the enamel signs out on the wall, the catcher's mitts, matchbooks and anvils, blow torches and tinfoil balls? Only those English setters with your toes pointed up to the sky, the meat grinders, puzzles, and chemistry sets. Could I have all your stuff when you die? Was the voice of that old rascal Satan, who is kneeling down close by my side. Garage sale Bob looking over his shoulder, and a hope that I hadn't yet died. Those souls are my biggest collection, he said with a gleam in his eye. But you could go in the other direction. if I could have all your stuff when you die, would you give me the convict and tramp board, the granite ware lanterns and sleds, the boxing gloves, tools, and your records, just the Beatles, the Stones, and the Dead? You know that you can't take it with you to your heavenly home on high. Oh, when you pass through those gates and they hand you your wings, could I have all your stuff when you die? But the angels consulted St. Peter, said, Pete, hear the word of the Lord. I'll trade Dick and his red-headed widder for the Porsche and that 34 Ford.
Thanks. So now we're going to do this, the last PowerPoint lecture. My assistant, Julie, who sort of helps me with some of these things, she put the hallelujah in there because she's the one who has to do most of the work when I put one of these things together. Let's see. I get to do this. Green is go. So these are digital copies of old slides, starting, this is work in 1965-66. And the best thing about these old digital slides, digitized slides, is how dirty they are. And that's sort of, and some of them are actually moldy, which, you know, you won't see this again when people go strictly to digital. So this was work done at the University of California in Berkeley in the 60s before, there's a nice mold on that one. Before I went to Italy, and there's the uranium glass that it was easy to melt back in the 60s because you could just go down to the ceramic supply place and buy bags of uranium oxide. I went to Italy in '69, and this is some of the work I made there. And I basically worked on in the line. I would take over like the youngest, least skilled guy's job, and then that guy would move up to the next skilled job, and that guy would move up to the next skilled job, and later the guy before the maestro, he'd get to go outside and have a cigarette or something. So they really liked me there. Then I got to make some of my own work. Like one day a week, I could just pretty much do anything I wanted, and sometimes I could get help, and sometimes I couldn't, depending on what the production schedule was. But here I am. This is my first murrine I made were these stars, and they had a six-pointed star mold in their mold shop. I said I need a 5-pointed one. They said, why don't you use a 6-pointed one? I said, no, it's got to be a 5-pointed one. So they said, well, go ahead and make it yourself. So that's when I was learning to weld, and then he saw such a mess I was making that he took it over and finished it for me. This is the first letters and word I made. I was just in Venice at the factory last fall, and there was a big fire there in '81 or '82, and they lost everything in the offices. And I was told they lost all my drawings and designs, but they didn't. They were still there. And I found the original drawing of me figuring out how to make the letters F-U-C-K. It's a pretty interesting piece of paper. Actually, I had to make 3 letters because the U and the C are the same one. And these are things I made there. In the morning, I'd go in and look at on the board they had all the colors they melted the night before. They had like 22 pots of color, 22 pots of glass, and about 18 or 19 colors. And they weren't all compatible first thing in the morning, but during the day, some of them would be compatible. So you had to pay attention if there was a go or no-go sign on the different pots of color. It was pretty much like being in a candy store from from my background in California, where we had like greenish blue, bluish green, green, blue, and this color we called California clear, which was sort of Coke bottle green. So. And then it was pretty obvious. This was when I came back and had my own shop. It was pretty obvious to do the Lord's Prayer. I could do it again, much better, but there's just really no point. And these are the two words, art and craft, these two piles of, you know. I spent a lot of time just making piles of things. And then I started making, I did these teapots starting in like the early 70s. And I still make them sometimes. I quit for a few years because I was having nightmares about this pattern, this crazy quilt pattern. It's a terrible nightmare to have patterns, you know, no people or anything, just patterns. I spent a year in Tasmania as an artist in residence at the art school there, and I spent that time developing some production modes and techniques. When I came back, none of which I ever put into production, but these are some of the things I was down there working on. And I figured out, I streamlined the whole handmade marble operation, learning how to, you know, figuring out how to do it and polish them and this and that. And I did that as a production thing in Berkeley for a little while. I'm also, I apologize, I'm the guy who introduced hand-blown Christmas ornaments into the world. I'm so sorry. I would have never done it if I'd known what happened. Then I started, in the mid-late 70s, I started fabricating things, which basically means putting things together with different kinds of glues. And this slide looks like it's out of focus, but it's not. The piece is actually out of focus. It's like layers of clear that cast that weird shadow. This is a big long chunk of the Lord's Prayer, which later I had to disassemble and slice it up because it was so valuable. So I started making these fabricated things, and some of the stuff in my shop, obviously from the pictures from the video, I collect a lot of things, and some of the stuff I collected started appearing in my work. That's a sand painting in the bottom there, and salt and pepper shakers. Toothbrushes. These things, I found out these toothbrushes are only good for about 40 years. Because these have all decomposed, and I'm not sure, I can't find any more of these toothbrushes. And the conservators, like people at the Corning Museum, they just hate this stuff. And the guy there, the head conservator now, he says he's going to retire before all my glues start to fail. Here's all the words to the Lord's Prayer, which were, you know, was part of the process, and I put them on this tripod. Except I changed "hallowed be thy name" to "herald." So over the years, the teapots got better, and patterns got tighter, and I became a better glass blower. These were really big at the time. Now they're just like normal size, but they're like 3 feet tall, which was really big for me. And but now it means nothing. This was a project. These were based on rockets taking off with the exhaust. But my friend Nancy came and said, "Gee, these are so phallic," and it just ruined it for me. I said, so nothing really happened with these. They just sort of end up in the garden. There's a really moldy slide. I mean, these were really complicated Zanferico pattern blown glass bottles on highly decorated ceramic plates that I made that then I slathered with really ugly latex paints. I was teaching at UCLA, trying to teach my students that just because you could do something doesn't necessarily mean it's a good idea to do it. I encountered this guy who's now my best friend, Thurman Statham, and we collaborated together for quite a few years. And one thing he made as a student at RISD was these clear glass cones that stacked up with plate glass like this. And I said, let's do it again, but let's use the teapots. So he said, sure. And if you ever want to steal an idea, the best way is to go directly to the source and just say, let's collaborate. And then you can, and then you can do the same thing, you know, and no one gets mad that way. That's my old dog in the background. So that's Thurman on the ladder. We did a bunch of large-scale installations all around the country and once in Europe. It was a lot of trouble, a lot of fun. I learned a lot, and he was a better fabricator than I was, and I could paint faster than he could paint. So I did most of the painting, and he did most of the cutting, and then we glued it all together between us. These are different towers we made in different places. I've done a few residential installations, but I really don't like it. I don't like doing it. It's just too much trouble, and it never looks right. Everything is too clean and too well lit for me. But the good part is that they always have to have more stuff, so I get to sell things that way when people hire me to install my work. This was a good one. This is the earthquake in San Francisco. The Saxes, these famous collectors, lost a whole bunch of their art glass collection, and they shipped it up to me for me to remake something out of it. And the UPS guy, who was a friend of mine, says, "Dick, you better open these crates. They sound really bad." It was just broken glass inside. So I made these sort of curio cabinets from Mars, putting all together all these different famous artists' pieces, just reassembling them. I made a couple of floor lamps that lights up the floor. And I made these like 3-foot tall sort of kid-sized curio cabinets to put my work sort of in the way it was in my shop, because my pieces would be in a gallery or a museum shelf, and it just didn't look the same as it looked in my shop, which I liked the way it looked in my shop better. So I started making these little places for these pieces to live. Then I made these things, and my career plummeted. I actually had a couple exhibitions canceled. And they wear well, though. They look better now than when I made them, that's for sure. I guess people get used to them. Still making things and assembling them. This was a show I had in Seattle. It was called Inventory. I just took everything out of my shop and built this box out of 2x4s and sheet glass and put everything in it. That's another really good way not to sell anything. Yeah, this was my shop I had in Seattle for a while, where I did all the painting and fabrication. But most of the work I make is out on the island. These are all large. They're like 6 foot tall, blown elements that are all glued together and then painted. That's paint. It's not glass. I know it ruins it for some of you, but. And I made these things. Unfortunately, there's this problem I have that no matter what I make, it always looks better if I put a teapot on top of it. So I got stuck in this thing for a while, and I still do that. I still have that same problem. I tried to get out of it. Here I tried to do balls, but later I took the balls off and put teapots back on it. See, it just looks better with those things up there. This is an installation shot from some gallery, and this is when I started working with this weird Italian technique called granulare, which means lumpy. And it's basically a hard glass inside of a soft glass, so when you blow it, it goes all lumpy. This is my installation of my Rempel rubber toy collection, which my sister just drove away with. It's going to be sold on eBay, the whole collection. if anybody's interested. Another installation, found objects. It used to be called Sleepy Mexican, but that's no longer politically, it's not PC anyway. And so now they're called siesta wear. And I always like multiples of things. I've always been more interested in quantity than quality. So I make a lot of things and I stick them, I put them in things. I make like these fake sample boxes as if somebody could order, could go through and order this. I've actually seen people copying down the address they were going to write away for their sample boxes. And most of the imagery is all from 1930s National Geographic, so just more, good luck to them getting a reply. And this is when right around this time I started working with Bullseye glass, because it's compatible. It's as long as I get something into the annealing oven, I'm 99% of the time it comes out the next day pretty much the way it went in one piece. And what I do, every once in a while I come down here in my truck and I load it full of glass. I've got a cosmic trade with Dan and Lonnie where no money has ever exchanged hands. And they let me take it off and do whatever I want with it, which is mostly I remelt it. I have like a 100-pound pot crucible that I do the color wheel. I start off with all the light colors, go through the cadmiums, and I go from white to yellow to red, then I end up with blue and black. And it takes me anywhere from like a month to 2 months doing it, whether I'm doing one day of it or 2 days of it, and how much I need of each color. And when I melt the color, I basically have a time frame when the glass is good, and I have to keep track. And I have first day and second day glass, basically. It's sort of oversimplified. And I have to keep track of it, because if I'm going to combine it with the other glasses later, they have to have the same melting schedules. And so, and things crack, Part of the deal I have with Dan and Lonnie is I never complain about anything. If things crack, I know it's my fault, because when it was put in the truck, everything was compatible, And they, we've had this discussion. They don't even like me doing this, and they don't really want other people to do this because other people would complain. They know I won't complain because we had a deal. But anyway, because of that ability to put all these colors together that's compatible, I can make some things that I couldn't make any other way. And one thing I did all these silhouettes, which are real time consuming, but once you get them, they last a long time. Now these are object comparison boxes, and when you compare things, you need at least 3, I found out. Otherwise it doesn't work. You can't do it with 2, and more than 3 is unnecessary, so there are just piles, there's things in 3s. Especially big things like locomotives, you'd only need 3. These are found paint by number paintings that I had to restore. And then I use them in various sort of shelving units. And this is with the granulari glass. This is Bullseye now. This is sort of probably most of this rest of this talk is all Bullseye glass, which I started working with in I think 91. Besides all that opaque stuff, sometimes I blow things out of clear, not very often. And this is a project I did with my friend Dante Marioni, who I've known since he was 8 years old. And we get together, we haven't done that for quite a few years now, but we got together every once in a while and made these really fancy Zanferico cups. And we did solid color ones too. Here's a photograph I made. It was a big mess doing it, but here's another double exposure, which is it was unintentional. This is when I shot 4x5s, which is much more fun than digital cameras, and I miss all using my 8x10 and 5x7 cameras, 4x5s. This is sort of at the end of the run. Colors got more subtle, shapes changed. We were just at Pilchuck a couple weeks ago, and we tried to do a couple of these, and they were almost impossible. Yeah. There's another thing. He made these whoppers, and I decorated a couple of them. And then we went on this tangent of the stuff that Baravier did in the 50s, called sort of oaky things. And we're just testing how to do this. We're both interested in doing it. And his stuff went one way. It was a beautiful way he went, and I went in this sort of clunky, strange way with the stuff we made. And this is really why I started using Bullseye. This is I was making these things based on some designs by the architect Carlos Scarpa that he did for Vanini before World War II, in the late 30s, early 40s. And when I was there, they were still producing some of them, but I never saw them made. Just like every once in a while, I'd see them, come out of the annealing oven, but I never saw them made. Basically, these pieces don't look anything like what he did, but it's the same technique where I make all the murrine, I pull it out, I cut it up, I fuse it into a flat thing, and while it's still hot, I pick it up and put it on a mold or inside a mold and basically slump it. But I do it all in the glory hole because that's just sort of the way I work. Only recently, a few times, do I do the shaping in the kiln like most of you folks do. And then the other parts, the foot and the knop is just blown. So here's a good compatibility test right here. Here's the little silhouettes and my stuffed canary, Otis. It's illegal to stuff canaries. Did you know that? But it was so hard to keep him still otherwise. Here's one of the Scarpa pieces upside down with a flower stuck in the foot. This is one that's made out of vegetables. Gourds, and I think at tops the big is some sort of gourd, or it's a papaya, I forget. These have a shelf life of about 3 days. These are large, 5-foot tall oil cans. And this is a really big thing that I've been having. It's been living outside now for like 12 years, and I've been slowly watching it decompose. It's sort of it's a test of how the glues and paint does with snow on top of them, and then melting and freezing again. So this is more of that granularized stuff, which I really like making. It's very, very difficult to blow, and I'm just barely in my control mode. It's just always slightly out of control, which makes the shapes more interesting. But then I was trying to figure out what to do with them, and I thought, well, I could stack them on a ladder. That looks pretty good. I could put them in boxes. I could play with them with other things. These are like a couple of feet tall, and they have all the silhouettes glued on the outside. Wooden anvils. They're actually more expensive than real anvils, but they're just so hard to ship. So I made them out of wood. And then I had this show at the Seattle Art Museum, a retrospective, and I wanted to do a book, so to get money together for a book, I made this run of these sort of retro stars and stripes with Bullseye colors, and that's how come they're so crisp. This is a weird process I've figured out that is now going to go into production at Vanini probably next year. Not teapots, but just this pattern. It's called oculare, and it's a reversed axis left and right hand twist. It's really hard to do, and barely worth it. It's the only animal I've ever made, an elephant. It's too bad it represents the Republicans, but I try not to think about that. I had a show in Venice at the famous restaurant there, Cafe Florian. I got to be in there for a long time and assemble things. And I got a whole room to play with. It was pretty fun. A lot of hard work, though. I worked at the Waterford factory in Ireland and made these things out of their lead crystal. And in their storeroom, they have all these. They had glass elephants and Labrador retrievers just on the shelf, you know. So I just said, "Can I have some of those?" They said I could have as many as I could carry, and they're really heavy. Another sample box, the shmoo shape. These are wax candles. I got really good at making potatoes. And then I started doing these hot slab constructions, which is, you know, pulling all the cane and then suiting up with a suit, you know, a silver suit and gloves and, you know, respirators and hoods and stuff, and assembling these things with my hands. There's a sequence coming up of how they're made, or sort of how they're made. But this is, once again, great compatibility tests. You know, it's pretty amazing. I didn't lose more than I lost. Because this is not what Bullseye had in mind when they were making these colors. Every Valentine's Day, I make my wife a present. Oh. So here's a sequence of how they're made. So I'm setting up on ceramic paper. Here's a couple of things set up. These are going to be bottles, obviously. So you can just sort of see the idea. And then they're all heated up. And I have this thing called the captain that goes in and out of the glory hole. The captain is named after my old assistant, Captain Dave, who used to do this. So it's the captain. It goes in and out of the glory hole. And some of these slides aren't exactly the right order, but you get the idea. So here's shaping it, fusing it all together, and flattening it, and, you know, maybe going in and out of the glory hole 20 or 30 times for this piece. It takes, you know, maybe an hour to do. Here, turning it around. You can see the gloves I have. I go through like 10 pairs of gloves per piece. I mean, I don't ruin 10 pairs, but, well, I sort of do ruin some of them, but they just get hot and I have to switch gloves. Then at one point, I cut out the ceramic paper and remove it. And then that's just a process of heating it up, bringing it out, and then folding it up, just like clay. Really hot clay. And then it gets, you know, Gene and Amy are they're helping me here. They keep things hot, and I have a really hot oxy-propane torch where I start to weld all the seams. And at one point, when I have the seams pretty well set up, I put a mold on the inside. I used to use this, you know, just fiberfrax, which is deadly serious thing to work with. But now I use a harder mold that doesn't fill the air with little particles that shine in the sun coming in. So anyway, it has a mold that goes on the inside, and then it gets turned over, and all that bottom gets all welded. And then at one point, I remove the mold and sort of finish it, sort of finesse it up a little bit, and that's how sweaty I get on one piece. So. And that's sort of what these things are, how those things are made. Here's a picture of it on a truck, really nice truck. So once I figured out how to make that, I realized I could make all kinds of things. Like I could make dustpans, I could make boats, houses, scary kind of boats, a wedding cake, pyramids. And at this point, I started going back and grinding the surfaces, engraving with wheels to get to. When I make these things, they get all messed up. They have fingerprints and smudge and stuff like that. So I clean up all the outsides on these. So I made these things here, and I said, you know, I've seen this pattern before. You know, it was a little bit of Jun Kaneko. I wasn't even thinking of Klaus Moya until I saw his pieces later. But it reminded me because I studied design in college, and one of the things I liked was in World War I, they painted boats with this pattern, these razzle-dazzle, it was called razzle-dazzle in the United States, and dazzle camouflage in England. And the idea was just the U-boat captains, when they come up with their periscope, they couldn't tell exactly which direction it was headed, because they had to launch the torpedoes way ahead of time, so they had to figure it out. So that's how this pattern came about. It's pretty crazy. I mean, they actually did this, and a lot of them were in colors, but not any of the photographs that survived in colors. So that's why I started doing these things. And every once in a while, one will crack. This one cracked, and I was happy. That means I got to keep it. You know, so I look at it. It's on my desk. I look at it all the time. And if it wasn't cracked, it'd be someplace else probably. And you can see how those are set up. So these pieces, the panels are all fused into sheets, and then when they're cold, I cold work them so they all fit. I bevel the edges 45 degrees and figure out how it all goes together. Here you can sort of see some parts lying around. And then they go on in the oven in a mold like that, and when the top part slumps down, then I know it's warm enough I can pick it up. And I pick it up and work it in the glory hole, in and out like the other one. And when these are all done, the surface all gets cleaned up. I didn't know there were so many pictures of them. There's the other thing. This is a famous MG race car from the 30s. And every year I try to go to the World Finals in Bonneville, the Salt Flats. And those two things that I like, I decided to start making cars. And these are some of the first ones, just stripes with mirrored on the inside. These things are a couple of feet long, or some of them bigger, some of them are smaller. And then it has like brass armatures and mostly wooden wheels that I made. Here's the vegetable one. This is one I found, and it was missing the driver, so I put the penguin salt shaker in there with a little bubble over it. These are pretty current. You know, the last couple of years, I'm still sort of working on this idea of these cartoon shaped cars, teapot cars. They look like clown's feet, some of them. I don't want to talk about that. This is the 7 steps of making this fractal murrine called a Sierpinski triangle, and you can see like the first how it's made. You start off with this triangle, and then you put that triangle in the middle with red ones on the outside, and you keep adding a white triangle in the middle, and after a while, every little part of that is the same as the whole thing. That's what fractals are, and I could get to the 8th and 9th stage before it started cracking because I made a mistake. I should have been heating the white squares every time I put the other things together. So I would have all had the same, days of heat. Very, very time-consuming thing. But once I have them, then I can play with them and put them on things. Hard to look at. This is another thing I'm still working on, my toy gun collection that I'm remaking all the handles for. So these are all fused and ground, and here's some more lumpy ware, but made some birds and eggs. And what do you do when you can make eggs? So I put them in baskets and little egg holders, put them in cages. Starting to run out of ideas now about eggs. But with balls you can stack. It's really hard to stack eggs. So I made these nice sphere pyramids. They're pretty much like a sample of all the patterns you can make. And when they're all acid etched after I knock all the shine off them with acid, and then after that I have to run them through the dishwasher. Altered chemistry sets. You get these chemistry sets, and they always have a picture of the retort, but you never get one. So I decided that was missing, so I went back and made retorts. These are, I call these chicken breasts, because that's what the bottom piece looks like when it comes out of the box. Going back and diving back into my salt and pepper shaker collection. And these are all Bullseye colors. And I'm starting to use some of my old work as found objects. You know, I opened up some boxes that I hadn't opened in 30 years, and some of them I finished, and other ones I just used other ways. This was the top of a Scarpa that I turned upside down and made into a car. So I'm just sort of repurposing things. There's my shop. No, that's my pool table, which I hardly ever get to play pool on it anymore. Just a couple shots of my shop. These are recent cars, recent pieces. This is the last thing I made before I had to start working on my house. Some of these are in the show here. I did a residency at Tacoma, and so I couldn't use Bullseye there. We talked about it, whether we'd melt clear there, and decided not to do it. So these are with other colors, and they're just they're much trickier. And also, I'm not familiar with them, so I don't know how soft they are. The Bullseye, I pretty much know which ones are soft and which ones are hard. But using this other glass, and I think that's it. Yeah, thank you.